Welcome to the Tech Savvy Professor podcast, which features two faculty members who love tech and love making it part of their work. I'm Marty Gensius, a faculty member at Kent State University.
And I'm Eric Perry, a program director and associate faculty at Divine Mercy University.
I guess I should say I'm a program director now too, although it's not something we have another person who does other parts of the program, so I have a hard time saying I'm program director, but it seems like a lot of the stuff is coming my way. And that's why today we want to talk about managing your calendar and calendar apps that we've attempted to do. I think last week I might have mentioned, I don't know if this was on the podcast or after the podcast, how I was really trying to wrangle my email. Because and how much I hate Outlook, which hasn't changed in a week. But particularly if you're a Mac user, Outlook is a terror for us. But that's what universities use. What I did, it was really simple. I took my personal email and my Gmail, which is sort of, a bunch of different things in my Gmail, and took them out of Outlook. And the only thing that goes into Outlook is my work mail address. So I don't have three pieces of email coming from three different directions that I have to sort or have to keep in place. And took the other two emails, and I'm using a separate app. I am trying Spark again. I haven't tried all the stuff with Spark. I'm using classic Spark, which sounds like, Coke from the 70s. It's classic Spark. It's not new original Spark, or it's not AI Spark, or I forget what the term. You have three different Sparks that you can get.
OG Spark. OG.
Yeah. So I'm using classic Spark for those two other emails, which I don't need to access constantly through the day. And I'll open them up occasionally, see that half of it's junk, deal with some things like some of the podcast stuff I do. People use my Mac mail to get in touch with me. And so those things show up there. But it's so nice just to have to go to one email to sort through the stuff for my job. So, and I don't know if I did my organization process any better, or it just seemed like things are snapping into place better for that. And I'm not losing things amongst the forest. But today it's calendars and how we kind of handle calendars and the demand for appointments and the demand for tasks in a way. And how we take appointments and how we manage those appointments. So we're both going to talk about what we're doing and sort of why we do it this way. And then I've got a couple of apps that I've used in the past to try and appify my calendar appointments with different levels of success for me. But obviously, I'm still doing it the way I'll talk about in a minute. Any general comments before we start?
Just calendars are kind of the secondary nightmare to email for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if there was a second thing that I look at far too often during the day, it's the calendar. And a lot of it's the meeting requests part and availability and trying to figure out who's doing what when. And we don't really have a shared calendar that way, so I can't really tell. And it's not something a lot of faculty even want to mess with.
Yeah.
So, but for me, I need it. I need to make sure that I know where I'm supposed to be and when, or I won't be there.
Yeah, the last time I stopped managing my own calendar and turned it over to someone else was when I worked in a mental health agency in 1991. And prior to that, I managed my calendar by myself. And after that, I was determined I was going to manage my calendar myself. I get these little intrusions from the university who say, we're going to put this thing on your calendar. You need to accept it or decline it. Or maybe it. And, if you decline it, then it disappears completely and you don't know that it even exists. Or that it's going on while you're doing something else. So you don't remember necessarily to check in with it. I will maybe it in most cases to leave it in my calendar, but let the person know I'm probably not going to be there because of this or that, or accept it. And then it's built right into my calendar. Problem is that comes through Outlook, and Outlook does not transform itself to anything else but Outlook. And half the time it doesn't show up well with Mac apps, either the portable devices that you use or on your desktop. So we have one person who's very ambitious in our college and schedules stuff for the dean, and she will schedule a whole slew of meetings for the whole year and then come back and decline all those meetings or pull them all back. And it's like, I'm never sure if that's going to stay there or not. So when I accept it, in order to see it on my other calendars, I go ahead and create a parallel appointment. So when she pulls them back, I still have my parallel appointment for that activity in my calendar. And then I have to contact her and say, are we really having a meeting or not? I can't figure this out. But it's the bad habit. I remember just this year, in 1 week, she scheduled, pulled back, scheduled, pulled back, and scheduled, pulled back 3 times. And that was because the dean kind of said, no, we can't do it that day. I'm going to be out of town or whatever. But it was a calendar mess. And I still don't know when I'm supposed to show up. So
well, I will say Google Calendar has a nice feature that you can toggle on and off, that even if you decline a meeting, it will still show it on your calendar, kind of grayed out. So you know it's there.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's an option in Outlook or not, because I've been trying to vary Outlook as far as I can from my field of view.
I've got a university that buys into Microsoft. Google just seems too spooky for them to do that, to turn it over to Google, who will then know everything that we do and when we do it. God forbid that information leaks out. So problem solved if I can get everybody on Google. Besides the problem of, your own information then becomes Google's. But the problem would be solved because that would work. So it would work in such an interactive way, and I would be happy with that. So, I dream of finding ways to make Outlook better or easier, but the scheduling piece is still very difficult. So my style of doing scheduling is somebody requests an appointment. They send me an email. It goes sort of to the tune like this. And this is I'm kind of pretending I'm a student. Hey, Marty.
Not Dr. Gensius, Marty.
Hey, Marty, I would really, or hey, Mr. Gensius. I love those too. I really need an appointment. Can we schedule an appointment sometime?
For what?
For what? For when? Online, face to face. So I have created, using Text Expander, a snippet that's an automatic reply. Once I put the snippet in, and I can just press reply and it goes back to the student. Okay, what do you need? Is it time sensitive? Are you talking about a face-to-face meeting, or are you talking about a Zoom meeting? Please provide me with 3 dates and times that you're available. Once I receive this information, I will go to my calendar. I'll select one that works for both of us and reply with, if in the case of a Zoom meeting, that's 90% of what students want now. Case of a Zoom meeting, I'll also give you a link to have that meeting with. It gives, the process that I use gives the person who wants to schedule an appointment some choice, because in many ways, my schedule is often more flexible than theirs. And I don't want to dictate particular times that say, this is when I do my appointments and that's it. So, my responsibility is then to check my calendar and respond back to them. And it might be, the date is open, but I don't feel like doing it that day. They don't know that, but I'll pick another date that is also open because I've got other things going on in my schedule and I just need a little downtime from meetings. That has worked fairly well, and I think the word is out. Students are getting better at it. I try to tell that to all my advisees. This is how it works with me. But let's not play tennis. I need a meeting. Well, what is it about? Oh, it's about scheduling for spring. Okay, when just a whole flurry of emails back and forth can be exhausting for that process. And frankly, if I could convince my program to go on something like Discord or go on something like Slack. Those could be instant messages that I deal with throughout the day instead of constructed emails that could go back and forth with students. My reasons for doing it this way is it provides, I get some autonomy. I get to set my own schedule. And to the degree that it's driven by what students' needs are, I get to make decisions around that in terms of when the first available appointment is. And sometimes I catch things that don't need meetings at all and just need some feedback or something like that. So when it comes to being able to do Zoom meetings, it's much more flexible. Students seem to like that, and it saves me from driving into the office for a half-hour meeting that day that could have been handled by an email in a lot of cases. So that's my process. I use, like I said, I'm beginning to use when I get things in email that I have to address. I've started using reminders in Mac because that will carry over to every device. Mm-hmm. So like the reminder today is to send an email to Mike Bell about some statistics that I have to pull together for program evaluation. So I'll get an email and I'll just copy it into reminders. It won't give me the email per se, but it is enough of the email that I can search for it in email to do a response to Mike. So I've started using reminders as a checklist of things to do, and I can it's not the best to-do list, but it carries across all devices, and I have it so it opens up on my desktop when I turn my computer on. So I get that list right there for me to work with. And so far it's working until next week. What about you, Eric? I have a sense that you use a much more digital-based way of solving these problems.
Yes and no, right? I think because I get so much from, I think, faculty, students, and administration that, there's a good amount of time where I need to collaborate. I need to bring people together. I need times. I still use doodle polls a good bit to work out times that work for folks. All of us being on the Google side of things is helpful, but there's not a whole lot of faculty who actually keep a calendar. I was pretty surprised to learn that they don't have a calendar. So they have their meeting invites that they accept, but they don't necessarily track when they're doing clinical work or research work or that kind of thing, because their meeting schedule is much slimmer than mine. So that's one option that I kind of wish would work, is having that ability to use something like Google Calendar for availability. There's a find the time feature, which is a hoax. It doesn't actually, right? It's a trick. It's a trap. It doesn't help you. So I've never found it to be functional. Generally, you can put several people on there and hit find a time, and it just kind of simmers. And then it will throw out sometimes, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily available. It's really just checking your calendar for your availability. So I found that out the hard way. It's not actually a scheduling tool. Zoom Scheduler can be helpful. So that's something I like. But again, if it's integrated within your calendar, then it's going to match up those Zoom meetings and times. I only teach in Zoom. So I have the teaching times there, I have my meetings there, but occasionally I'll get an external meeting or something like that that just doesn't pop up there.
Yeah.
So I can't lean into that too hard. I've actually taken to now, when I know I need to send an email to someone, but I don't have time to write it, I will start a draft. Just quick notes. Here's what the action I need to take. I'll start a draft. That draft sits in my folder, and I can see right now I have 4 drafts of emails that I need to send at some point over the next couple of days. So that kind of helps out with the task. But I think the calendar management part is different. The Teams also has a booking feature, and it uses your Teams calendar, and you can actually set up your availability. And that's something I think I'm going to try here soon. I like the idea of giving folks some agency to say, okay, here's when I'm available. But I'm also hitting that I need work-life balance. So I think I'm going to structure some times that I can have available for folks to select from. And I think from there, I can still deny it and change it. I get some options as to whether or not I'm going to approve that time. So I'm thinking about doing that more so for student meetings and things that are more impromptu. It's funny because somebody used the term the other day for the meeting that you talked about. We have a president's meeting. They called it a mobile meeting because it's free to move wherever it does, based on somebody's schedule who's higher above
Oh,
you
yeah.
in the hierarchy. So it's just
Yeah,
kind
I
of a
guess.
mobile meeting. And it got moved a couple of times and sorted around, and then I moved stuff and it got moved again, and I had to move the stuff back. And I don't know what you do about that necessarily, but I think there's some good tools. Again, I like Doodle polls. It's simple,
Yeah.
gets your availability together. And there's lots more options for the paid version of Doodle that allow you some functionality. I like the sign up part of it. If I want to structure, I was doing one-on-ones with faculty as an example. And I had 15 of them to meet with. So I put out there 18 times and they picked the ones they wanted, first come, first serve, and then it updates automatically. Oddly enough, you can.
Does it remove the ones that if I sign up for 10 of the 18, does it remove the other 8 when the next person comes in and says you get to choose from these 10 now, or
Yeah, so each time one gets selected, it gets taken off the list.
okay.
And then it automatically sends them the Zoom link and the invite,
Okay. All right. That's
which is
interesting.
nice. Now, if you have a Qualtrics account and you don't want to pay for Doodle and you're cheap like me, you can do this with Qualtrics. You can create a Qualtrics survey that allows folks to select times, and then you can pull those times, and it will remove those as the options are selected, just like you would be building a survey to remove those options. One thing I will say with Doodle versus Qualtrics, Doodle is almost in real time. There's no lag.
Yeah.
Qualtrics can have a data lag so that if two people are filling this out at the same time, they might actually be able to select the same option. I haven't had that issue in Doodle, but I've had it in Qualtrics using that.
Yeah. We do Doodle for pretty much all of our dissertation meetings,
Mhm.
or in some cases in student meetings, we'll do a Doodle poll. Students will initiate them and say, put the times that you're in. And then, like we co-chair dissertations. So there are 2 faculty on it. And if I'm last to the Doodle poll and I see that my colleague has only put 5 in because they've X'd out the ones that they can't do,
Mhm.
as much as I'd love to put all the other times that I'm available, it doesn't make any sense. So I'll just choose out of the 5, maybe the 2 or 3 times that I'm available. So all of us line up at those 2 or 3 times, and the student can say, this is when we're doing it. But yeah, we use Doodle quite a bit. And I think, frankly, it's a tool that, along with Zoom, is just pay the fee. It's one of those things that the free versions can limit you. Like, I think the free versions limit how many spots that you can actually put on a calendar, that you can't do, unlimited spots. You're limited to the
Mhm.
amount that you can do. And that gets frustrating for students because they're like, I can only put 10 spots on here or whatever it was. However, I'm available again the following week. So it's kind of one of those things that you just have to figure in as a cost of living, along with Zoom. I think that's a cost of living thing. Having meetings that only run 40 minutes when you know they're going to run an hour. Now, what I've done is I have 2 paid Zoom accounts. I have 2 paid Zoom accounts, and I will offer my Zoom link because I know we don't have to worry about the student shutting down 40 minutes into the meeting and having to restart up. So again, another kind of cost of living thing that you need to have. If you're interested in following your meetings, there is an app that I use. It's a Mac app, but I'm sure you can find these on PC too, called Meeting Bar. And it's a little app that appears up in your bar and across the top. And it tells you right now, it's giving me information that I have a meeting with you with 34 minutes left, or no, 24 minutes left, during this hour where we're recording it. And it has the Zoom link in it, so I can just connect directly with you through that meeting bar. It will tell me what else I have during the day and whether there are Zoom links or I guess team links that are part of that. So you can have that right on your desktop. if you want to. Any other creative ways that you manage to, and the reason you do this is because you can't get everybody on board in terms of Google, and some people don't keep calendars.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big cross-platform issue. So we have people on Mac, we have people on PC, we have people who keep a calendar, we have people who don't. So availability becomes a real big deal in
Yeah.
scheduling meetings and managing the calendar. I think just being familiar with the settings. So I like to see that even if I'm not going to a meeting, it may be a topic that I need to check in on. So I'd like to
Hmm.
see it there. But yeah, I technical tools wise, I found the Zoom scheduler to be somewhat helpful as long as everybody's on there. The Google Calendar availability and sharing a little bit more problematic unless everybody's in the system.
Yeah, I from apps wise, the couple that I have looked at, the one that I spent the most time was Calendly,
Mhm.
like calendar, but with an ly and that instead of an er at the end. And I don't know who turned me on to this, but I thought it was pretty cool. It's a online service that you pay for that you sync your calendars with, and you can put in spaces in the calendar that says this is open for people to see me. I think it works if if you're doing a private practice and you want to manage all your appointments online. It's a great app for doing that. And there are other similar apps that do that too. You can, and I shared this with Eric before the show, a link I just typed in a Calendly alternatives. And what you'll do is you get a website that will be something like 10 different alternatives to whatever you put in. It's generally sponsored by the person who gets the top rating. Or even produced by the person, but they'll give you a grid and they'll say, here's all the things that you can get with these apps, but you can get everything with our app. And that's our number one choice. But it's good because it's informative and gives you some options. I tried Calendly, and it meant that I would have to surrender some of my time, and it might have been COVID that killed it for me. I'd have to surrender some of my time to say, I'm leaving this open. It could be that a student schedules during this time, and that's just going to be my life. And what I didn't do was and you can do this with Calendly, is you can put defaults in it to say, no one can schedule an appointment with me less than 3 days ahead,
Right.
which means even though my calendar's open tomorrow, I don't want to wake up tomorrow morning and be surprised that I have an appointment suddenly. I didn't do that originally, and it was like, uh, the lunatics were in charge of the asylum. I was getting things thrown at me all day long because of open times. You can also block out times. You can do the kinds of things. You can restrict times to certain things. You can change it to half-hour appointments or 30-minute appoint or 1 hour appointments. You can even set it up like if this is an advising appointment or if it's they come in half hours. If this is a dissertation appointment, those come in hours. So you can categorize and have them categorize what they want to see you about, and also include a statement about what it is. So when it comes up, you can find out more about what the topic is before you walk in the door or get on the Zoom to have that conversation with them. So Calendly is the one that I'm probably most familiar with. Another colleague in my office, I noticed in their signature line, they use You Can Book Me or youcanbook.me as another service. And I think they do some clinical work on the outside too. So they must have seen some advantage to that particular service. But I would say that's another one to look at.
Yeah, I was going to say that the Teams feature, you may already have it if you're in the Microsoft landscape. It may be a feature that's already activated as the bookings feature. It just depends on what level of service your university has decided to go with,
Yeah.
which
As
does
soon
some
as
similar
yeah,
things.
yeah, and the other thing is I control that calendar. The university can't peek in it and see what I have available,
Mhm.
which is nice, which is real nice.
Yeah.
Whereas it's you don't have that option when you turn it over to university-based software like Teams.
Well, and that's
So,
a good point to make too. Even the calendar appointments that you set to private, an administrator in IT could view. So that's
yeah.
something to keep in mind. So you may be able to set them to private, and those who have access to your shared calendar might not be able to see them. But push comes to shove, they can get them if they want them. Mhm.
So those are a couple of. Are there any other kind of appy services that you're aware of?
No, I thought it was funny that you mentioned Calendly because I used it for a good period of time too. And I think the thing that saved me with it was the 48 hours, right? You can't
Yeah.
book anything with me within 2 days. So there's some options around that. I think I'm still digging. I might have to dig Calendly back out.
And I think it also has a function that you can't cancel an appointment, which sounds crazy, but I don't mean just you can't cancel it, but it ought to, if a student attempts to do that, I think there is you got to send me an email message. You got to tell me what's going on here,
Right.
you can't just leave me hanging.
Right. You need a rationale.
So that's helpful too. To kind of protect your own time. So yeah, I would look at Calendly, and I haven't spent much time with You Can Book Me, but I trust this colleague that I think she might have been using Calendly, and then suddenly now or not suddenly, but next I noticed she was using You Can Book Me. So she might have had some rationale in making the change. To me, it still sort of feels like I'm tossing up an empty space on my calendar each week or through, a couple of times a week and saying, fill me. I'm at your beck and call during this time, instead of let's have a conversation or at least an interaction around when I can see you and when you can see me.
Well, and it does overstep the process that you talked about earlier, which is sometimes the meeting is not the necessary choice to communicate. It
Yeah.
may be a question that's easy to answer via email, and somebody just prefers to talk about it, which you may not have the time for. Something silly, but an old supervisor used to do is he scheduled all hour meetings for 50 minutes and all half hour meetings for 25 to give some breathing room in between. And I think people saw the end of the meeting coming and got into that, but it took a little while for folks to get it. But so you have some transition time between meetings. I'm finding now that as I'm getting more back-to-back requests, I feel like that might be something I do too, is to change my standard time
Yeah.
to 50 or 25 minutes.
Yeah. And tell them you're taking the 5 minutes or 10 minutes to write case notes on the meeting. So it's like the clinical hour. You're in a clinical field. You need to set aside 10 minutes to write your case notes at the end of the hour. They can't book you hour after hour.
Right.
And you can't do the same with me. So is that a hint? Does that mean that we have to move into the case notes part of our conversation, which means we need to end the show and move out?
Right. Yeah. I think I need my 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Hope you found these things interesting. You can always email us at thepodtalknetwork@gmail.com. And if you have a question, we'll announce it on the next show and try to answer it for you. Look for us on Spotify, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, and all different podcast servers. Our bumper music is from Philip Gross, Rast, from the Free Music Archive. Everything you need to know is at thepodtalk.net. Look for other shows like Circular Firing Squad and the show that I'm working on right now, Vision Profiles, about the Apple Vision Pro and spatial computing. That's it for this episode. Thanks for subscribing to the Tech Savvy Professor.